Okay, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mary Ellen Holden, and I head up the New York chapter of the Geena Davis Institute in New York City. So we've got a council here that, for those of you who may recall, and I know a few people have come up to me already, we launched the New York Council here at J. Walter Thompson on July 31st of last year. So thank you for everybody who came to that event and to J. Walter Thompson for hosting this event with us again this year. And I want to also thank our members who have joined, and we have really begun to ramp up the programming here and are very, very excited to bring you screenings and roundtables and new events this year. So stay tuned for that. There are many benefits with membership. We also want to thank our sponsor, J. Walter Thompson, as well as other sponsors of studies who are in the room here, along with our CJ Advocates, that's our volunteer group, and we actually have well over 100 volunteers here in New York City, which is pretty remarkable. And we are revamping the program so that we can actually work with you more closely to tap into your skills and interests and make the program more valuable to you. So you'll be hearing more about that over the next few months. And tonight, I think everybody here knows it's International Women's Day. And I want to thank all of you for braving the weather and for choosing to be here with us tonight. When we started the chapter just literally under a year ago, it was before Me Too, it was before Time's Up, and it was before women and equality and inclusion were in the news, headline news, literally every day. And now things have changed tremendously. And one of the things that I just wanted to point out is that here in our packet, if you all take a look, we have a call to action card. And 2018 is clearly the year of action. Okay, it's something that everybody's talking about, and what we'd like you to do, and I know people don't always do this, but fill out the card before you leave tonight. Leave it, we'll pick it up, and we'll follow up with you on actions that you commit to today, International Women's Day, and see how you make progress over the next 3 to 6 months. For me, I've decided that the one action that I want to take is to apply a gender filter to absolutely everything I do. And that will help me to eliminate gender bias and diversity imbalance, both on air and in your life. So that's what I'm going to do, and that's what I'm committing to. With that said, I'd love to introduce Madeline Denomino, who is our CEO, and she will walk through some new research that we are unveiling tonight, followed by a panel discussion. Thank you.
Greetings, everybody. Happy International Women's Day. So how many of you are members? Okay. And those of you who are not, there will be a hat at the door on the way out. We hope you will join. So Alice Walker said that the most common way people give up their power is by thinking that they don't have any. So tonight is dedicated to owning your power. This study that I'm going to present tonight, we actually just finished up a few weeks ago. And it was really interesting because we're going to hear from Laura Trevino, but we have a partnership with GELSERT. And I don't want to give away the whole story, but in a nutshell, they sponsored this research because one of their best-loved products is called Otter Pops, which if you're like me, I couldn't get through the summer without them. And you'll hear more on that, but they really wanted to look at consumer packaged goods. Because historically, we have studied advertising, which we did in partnership with J. Walter Thompson. Thank you very much. We have studied, film and TV over the past decade or so. And this is the first study ever to look at brand mascots. And when you think about brand mascots, they are vital to brands because they are a symbol that conveys the essence of a brand. And mascots also designate who matters or not in our society. And similar to TV and film, the representation of gender and race in brand advertising imparts messages, and particularly messages that our children are consuming. When you think about the consumer packaged goods, you think about your cereal and all your products that were on the kitchen table when you were having breakfast, and it imparts messages about which identities confirm value. So for this investigation, we looked at 6,500 products out of the 13 categories that you would find in your grocery store, and that boiled down to about 1,096 brand mascots. Some categories rarely have a mascot, like beauty. Pet care was 19%, which was interesting. Half of the mascots, so half of the 1,096 were animals, 36% were human, 13% were humanoid, and about 5% were celebrities. So now I'm going to take you through the data. And similar to what we have historically found in mainstream media, we found that there was a 2-to-1 ratio of male mascots to female mascots. And that broke down to about 31%. And we all know women are 51% of the population. And what we found similarly in film was that female characters were only 32%. So the mascots unfortunately trended very similarly. We found out that 1 in 4 are shown as a stereotype, gender stereotype. And we also found that the male mascots were more likely to be shown as commanding with authority than the female mascots. We also found that the male mascots were more likely to be threatening with the potential of causing danger than the female mascots. We also found that male mascots were 7 times more funny than female mascots. And what was really interesting is with the Cannes Lions study, which some of you heard last year that we did with Thompson, where we looked at advertising, we found that men were 2.5 times more funny than women in commercials. And some of the creatives came up to us and said, well, that's because we don't get to write the funny commercials. So it's interesting when you think about humor and mascots that the male mascots are 7 times more funny. And even when you think about it in film and TV, Linda Szymanski, who's the head of PBS Kids Content, told me a week ago that there are no 6 to 11 TV shows with a female protagonist who's funny. And she actually has a paper that's called The Lack of Funny, which I want to dive into because 0, plenty in preschool, plenty in, we've got a lot of R-rated comedies, but nothing in that 6 to 11 window. What we also found is that female mascots are more likely to be clean. And interesting enough, when we looked at our Cannes Lion advertising study, we found that 48% of the time when we were in the kitchen, so we're cleaning and we're in the kitchen. And when it came to the world of work, only very few mascots were working. Only 4% of the mascots that were female were working. Now, one of the other things that we always talk about is sexualization, and this is exactly the same as our advertising study, that 1 in 10 female mascots were sexualized. And we also found that 25% times more likely to be shown as partially nude. We're talking food products, people. We're talking like, how is this possible? How is this possible out of 1,096 mascots that the females are 25 times more likely to be sexualized? I don't know. So we also looked at race. And so people of color are 38%, almost 40% of the US population. But they're only 15.2% of the brand mascots. And when we broke it down, it was 18% male and 12.7% female in terms of people of color. And similarly, what we found in our top 100 film data, that people of color out of the top 100 films out of the US were over 20%. And so we also found that if you break it down a little bit more, so out of that 15.2%, Latino mascots were 8.2%, African American were 2.9%, Native American 2.2%, Asian 1.2%, and Middle Eastern 1%. So we're really not reflecting even the United States culture when it boils down to these brand mascots. And what we also found is that 2/3 of the mascots of color are represented as stereotypes versus 2.8% for white characters. And last but not least, we found that mascots of color are 2 times as likely to be shown as threatening than white mascots, and that white mascots are twice as likely to be shown as authoritative. And the other thing, unfortunately, that was missing, there are absolutely no brand mascots with any kind of disability, physical or cognitive. So we're leaving out a huge, huge percentage of our American culture. So that's just some highlights. The full report will be out, I think, in late April or May, tied to something very worthy, which Laura will talk about. And without further ado, I'd love to bring up our illustrious moderator, Tiffanie Darke, who is the editor-in-chief of all A&E channels, and she drives all of their digital and social content. So I'm going to let Tiffanie take it away.
How do we turn the bottom? Yeah. So, hi everybody, good evening and welcome here to JWT. Happy International Women's Day to you all, which means that all the women in the room are going to speak up tonight. There's going to be Q&A. We're going to break the Q&A halfway through this. I want to hear your voices in the room. I want to hear your comments and observations. And then you are our guests tonight. We welcome your thoughts as long as they're respectful. So I would like to introduce my panel. First of all, I'd like to introduce Sarah Barclay, who is that rarest of birds, a senior female creator. Stand up as I think you should sit down, shouldn't we? Yes.
The lights do that.
So, sorry if you can't see, you'll have to crane your necks. Sarah started and grew her career in Australia, where she produced the best TV commercial in 25 years. You can see that one. And she was also the top 10 of the most awarded creative team in the world, before heading to New York City to be the Global Executive Creative Director of J. Walter Thompson, which is possibly the best job title I've ever heard.
Not quite, it's more a title, but whatever.
So next up is can I have Torsten Gross, who is our token male, the voice of strategic planning. Torsten, welcome to the panel. So I'm quoting here from Torsten's bio. From traditional to digital, media and innovation, spanning startup to monolith agencies, Torsten has run the full strategic gamut. He is also, mildly more interestingly, the only rescue scuba diver in a wheelchair in the world. Strategic planning. Next up we have Courtney Barker. Now, Courtney's bio is quite phenomenal. She is a TV and publishing veteran, and not the ECD at JWT as it says in the programme, but in fact an incredibly esteemed TV and book writer. She cut her teeth on Law & Order, which she wrote for 7 years, and has since published over 12 titles in self-help, children's, quality fiction and inspirational categories. She's worked with athletes and actresses, and now produces TV shows for Oxygen, such as not for Oxygen, but other shows, Hollywood Divas, Love and Hip Hop, It's Not You, It's Men. Watch that. And she's also the executive editor and co-founder of the Smagnalicious imprint Monami Books. Did I pronounce that right? Great. And finally, we have Laura Torino, who oversees brand strategy and positioning for some of your favourite food products. In her career, she's worked with Kellogg's, McCain, Snapple, and more. She is a marketing genius, once creating a new strategic business unit that exceeded company expectations by 250%. She is now the Vice President of Marketing at the Darke company. So I asked the panel, as it was International Women's Day, to come up with their female hero nomination for the day. And I'm actually going to start with Sarah, because she has got somebody who I think we can hear quite an interesting manifesto from. I think you should stand up for this.
Okay, but the light's bad. Okay, great. So I was...
They can't hear
They
you.
can't hear me.
Here.
How this?
Hello, there you go. Now you can hear me. So I was thinking about who I would use for this, and I was just looking around a couple of websites that I trawl for advertising news, and I found that a woman had written something, and she's a writer in Sydney, in an agency in Sydney, one of my hometowns. I have several, and she sort of took the if anyone remembers the Apple ad from 1984, Here's to All Crazy. So she took that poem and she kind of rewrote it for International Women's Day, and I thought it was just a remarkable thing that made me get goosebumps, so I thought I'd bring it and share it with you guys. So here we go. Here's to all the crazies, to all the brave women who dare enter the boys' club, and to all those who stuck it out. Here's to all the mums juggling kids and their career in an industry not supportive of it, and those who decided to leave it and never come back. Here's to all the women directors who've had to work twice as hard to get there as their male counterparts, and those still trying to get there. Here's to every woman with big enough balls to join a creative department full of them, and those who showed them when they got in there. That one was me. Here's to all the women who created something only to be slammed by someone called anonymous, and here's to those who didn't read them and kept creating. Here's to every single woman doing the same job as their male colleague for insert interest percentage per country here, less. It was 14.6% in Australia. And those doing something to try and equalise it. Here's to the mums who told their interviewer they were a mum when it cost them a job, and those who lied about it to get one. Here's to all the women who've been called a bitch for standing up for themselves, that's me too, and those who back them up when no one else would. Here's to all the women who've spoken up about harassment and those about to for fear of losing their jobs. Here's to the Me Too's, We Cans, and the I'm going to do it anyway. And here's to all the women who have been called crazy. Keep up the good work.
Okay, so my first question is, you all had phenomenal careers, are still having phenomenal careers, but we're none of us spring chickens. So I think we have an interesting perspective on what has changed since we started out, because we have seen a lot of change in the last year. We've certainly seen a lot of agitation for change. If you can cast your mind back to when you first started working, Laura, I'm going to start with you. What have you seen change in the way gender is represented?
Well, working at... Doesn't work. Okay. Starting off, I saw a lot of women at the lower levels, and the men were at the top. As I have gone through different types of companies, I will say what's been interesting is being the only woman being the only woman in the room with 14 of the men. I have seen where I've been told, gosh, now that you've adopted children, don't expect to have an upward trajectory. These types of conversations have leveled off. A louder,
Wait, why don't y'all move in? There are a couple seats up here.
But
They
the
want
one
to
thing
make
I
a
do, the one thing, I mean, I do have to say that I am starting to see more and more women in marketing at higher levels. And one of the things that I have seen is women who experience some of the same things are now creating their own teams. So for example, at GelCert, my team is half and half from a gender perspective. And what is great to see is the different type of culture that has evolved because of that. It's a lot more collaborative. There's a lot more ideas, and everyone has a different base of experience, and there seems to be more respect all the way around than from when I started out.
Thank you. And Courtney, apart from the fact that women are clearly 7 times less funny and therefore shouldn't be writing any comedic script, what changes have you seen?
Because I have, and I just want to clarify one thing, because in addition to all the lovely titles that you gave me, or that were listed here in my bio, my current position right now is VP of Alternative Programming at Adaptive Studios. The thing that I've seen change the most, and we discussed this when we talked about topics, I say that the more things change, the more things actually stay the same. And the reason I say that is because we have come such a long way, there's still so much further that we have to go. So although I've seen change, I also still see the lengths and the depths of where we have to go. For me in my industry, I've had a plethora of careers in the various mediums of entertainment, from publishing to scripted television to unscripted television to now working as an executive at a studio. And my focus in entertainment and throughout the various mediums has always been story. So the thing that I would say has changed in my career is, for the first time, there's more of a platform for authentic stories. And I would say the reason that is because we as women and women in entertainment have had to endure such a fight that now, especially off the heels of 2017 and as we're into the first quarter of 2018, that fight has gone to such a national platform that our stories have a platform and a basis for which we can finally tell them without so many blurred lines or a narrative that is set forth by our male counterparts. That's not necessarily inaccurate, but doesn't speak to the layers and the colors of who we are.
So have you found, as a creative in your career, that you have been stopped from telling the stories that you felt were authentic?
Well, I'm me, so I can't be stopped ever. But I can say I've had to fight a lot of times for there to be a variance in stories that represent women. And again, the fight for me throughout, be it publishing, throughout reality, throughout scripted, every time I'm the one in the room making the argument, and oftentimes the heated argument about who we are as women, and that we come from such an array of backgrounds, and to not be stereotyped or put into a box. Like when Ella was reading the statistics, it is very easy for us to be painted as housewives, or if you're a career woman, then there's always a backstory.
You're clearly a bitch.
Or there's a backstory there that's just not indicative of every woman's story or plight. So I think now I'm excited, I'm optimistic to say, I really hope that the sense of awareness, the sense of everybody showing up to the table, really wanting to understand and have a little bit of a sense of understanding will continue to create a platform for us to tell authentic stories that are true to who we are as a collective group of not only women, but people.
That's exciting. Torsten, what have you found in your career? Have you seen things change?
So there are a couple things that I would point to from a female perspective. First, there's a book called The Athena Doctrine, which is, I find very interesting because he points to how leadership is changing, and leadership going from being individual, being selfish, being protective, to now becoming collaborative, to becoming more nurturing, more empathetic. And from a strategy perspective, what I love seeing is the collaboration inside of a team. So I can talk about my team here, which is very strategic, but it's females will raise the collaboration level, and it will start to push out those that are not, right? And it'll raise the empathetic and sympathetic level to a place where it needs to happen. And so there are moments in work that I see that I'm envious of, and I know the teams that did it, where the Coke example.
Can you just explain that?
So Super Bowl, Coke spot, there were two. One of them that said he...
That was this year, right?
This year.
Yeah.
That said he, she, we, us, them. And the them was non-binary, right? Somebody who does not identify as sick, does not identify as man or a woman, but rather they and them. And that was interesting because now you're getting a different group of people that are saying thank you for identifying with me and giving me a voice. And that doesn't happen if you have just one group of people. And I think that the more empathetic you bring in from a female perspective as well, the more you're going to bring in views like that. And that's happened at least strategically, and Sarah's talked about creatively. I think that's amazing.
That's great. And then also you have a personal perspective as well. Let's not ignore the elephant in the room.
Sure, the elephant, I don't know if you guys noticed, I'm in a wheelchair. Shh, don't tell anyone. Yeah, it's interesting. I span two very large dichotomies, and that's I'm a senior white male, but I am also the smallest minority in our industry. And I asked a group of people a couple months ago, raise your hand if you've worked with somebody who's gay, and everyone puts up their hand. Raise your hand if you've worked with somebody who's black, and everybody raised their hand. And I said, raise your hand and leave it up if you've worked with somebody in a wheelchair, and only about 1/5 of the people raised their hand. And I said, put down your hand if that person was me. And out of the 1,500 people, there were 4 left. And I said, welcome to my world, right? So here's me, where it's kind of senior white male, but then I'm also the guy in the chair, and it's been noticed, and I've fortunately kind of gotten over that, but I still feel it quite a bit. Not a JWT, but there are times when people will treat me a little bit differently, and I'm okay with that, because there are times when I understand that you don't know what it's like to be in a chair, and it's a little weird, right? Because I'm short. I'm actually 6'5", but I'm not going to prove it. But it's that moment where I understand that it's a little bit, they don't know how to react, they don't know how to respond to me, but once they do, it is the moment of openness, right, where they see, okay, it's just as normal as everything else, and right, and the second you break that down, communication becomes a little bit more easier.
I think that's an amazing perspective. The white male and then the diversity. So Sarah, you're responsible for creating these ads.
Did I get that question too?
Yeah, I'm just reframing it.
Sorry.
What have you seen change? I suppose I'm going to ask you first in what you've created or been allowed to create, if I can say that. Okay, yeah, I'm reframing it on your toes now. What have you seen personally change around you?
I'll answer the second one first, and I'll come back to the first one. But when I was thinking about this question, I thought, well, I've been in this country now for 17 years, and I remember being a young creative in Australia, and actually it was very egalitarian back then. I mean, the blokes were still the ECDs and the CCOs, but that was just kind of normal for those times. And I thought I'd just trawl the lists of the top. There was the top ECDs, CDs, and creatives, and I was actually quite sad and flabbergasted at what I actually found. And this is like from an industry mag, it's called Campaign Brief, and it rates everyone by awards. And out of the top ECDs, and there were 47, there was one woman. Out of CDs, and there were 100, there were 8 women. So this is awards again. This is people who are doing clever stuff, recognised by all the award shows. And then just of the creatives, out of 130, there were 10. And I had this sort of text conversation with a friend of mine who happens to be a recruiter in Australia, and she said, oh, but childcare is really bad in Australia, and women are finding other ways to sort of work and think about it differently. And I was thinking, but that doesn't explain this disparity. I mean, yes, maybe you could take some percentage and give that to the women who are deciding on an alternative way of working within our industry, but those numbers are atrocious. And I actually felt really, really sad, because I thought my country would have done a bit better over the years that I'd left it. But it seems that it hasn't.
Is that indicative of the number of the gender, the way gender is employed, or is it the big...
No. Well, again, I didn't have those statistics, but I'm sure there are more than one... I'm sure there are more than 10 women out of 130 creatives.
So is that an all-male voting panel, or is that an unconscious bias?
No, I mean, it's all of the award shows, the Australian award shows, the overseas award shows, it's all of them. They do this list, kind of like the government report. But yeah, I was quite astonished. So I don't think it actually has changed. It's probably gone bloody backwards, sadly.
And what about out here then? What's been your experience since you arrived over here?
Interestingly, it's had its highs and its lows. I think, you know, I still find it's like people hiring like people, and it's interesting. I always say if I had real balls, I've got balls, but I've actually had actual balls, I think I would be in a different position than what I am in now, even though I'm in a great position. But
how do you get higher than global executive?
No, we do. That's kind of, it's a fancy title, but yeah, there's CCO jobs and there's worldwide CCO jobs. We like giving titles to people in our industry, but I just reflect on that sometimes, and I'm not bitter. It's just an observation that it still is very much man's world in our industry, and you still come up against, mostly white men hiring white men, which is kind of sad.
So I'm going to ask the panel now, and I'll start by confessing to mine. So the problem is we've got lots of women working in companies, but how many women do we have working at the top? I'm lucky I work for a company, A&E, where the CEO is a woman, but every single other person on the board is a man. So J. Walter Thompson, how many women on the board?
We have a CEO who's a woman, and she's great, British. We have...
They don't know, that's so brilliant. They're great creatives, they don't bother trying to think corporate.
The actual creative board, I know for a fact there are no women, are there, then, on the creative board, the council?
The creative council globally. No.
Anyway, if we had to think that hard about it, perhaps that's the answer.
Laura, what about at JASA?
But here in the office, there's 2 ECDs who are women and 2 that are men. So that's inside of this office is what would represent there. Sarah being one of those, Amy Carvajal, who's also here being another. So
that's great.
We can look up the actual number.
Laura, what about at JASA?
Well, JASA is a family-owned company,
so not on the board, then the leadership.
The leadership is surprising. There is the CFO is female, and then myself.
Cool, that's great.
So
That's fantastic.
And hopefully getting more.
Yeah. Well, love JASA, right. And Courtney, what's your, you work at Adaptive Studios, so what's the leadership like there?
I could answer that question directly, but I'm going to answer it indirectly. I was raised by a father who was a deputy sheriff in San Mateo County. And I just remember at 7 years old, and I tell this story often, my dad looked at me and said, there's something I need you to know and something I need you to remember. I'm 7. I did not understand the impact of this, what he was going to tell me, until I got it. He said there's going to be 2 things you're going to be that you will never be able to change. You're going to be black and a woman. The sooner you learn to accept that, the better. And so again, I was 7. I didn't necessarily know what that meant, but what I did take away from that at a very young age is that if that mattered to other people, I wasn't going to let it matter to me, because like he said, there's nothing I could do about it. So I don't care how many other females are or women are in positions of power, as long as I am. So that I can create the opportunities that I want for other people like me, regardless if they're black and a woman, but if they're good, to have an opportunity. And since my short stint at Adaptive Studios, I've been able to do just that. Be it me greenlighting, various shows, to creating various movies. I know who I am, so I create other opportunities for people just like me. So even if I'm the only one representing, I'm not going to stay that way, because I bring with me an army of strong women who tell great stories. And if I'm the one who you have to take the meeting with to get through the door, then so be it. I'm excited about that. Like I said, and I've done this throughout publishing. I've done it through, if I'm the only writer, when I was the only writer in the female and black, because I checked 2 diversity boxes. If I'm the only female black writer in the room, then guarantee you every cast member in my episodes were female, and whatever, even the dogs that were cast were female. So I don't really play the politics wherever. I don't play the politics of numbers, because I feel like there's strength in even one.
And you're in a position of power where you can create that change, and you're doing it, so congratulations. That's great. Yay. So, Torsten, you talk about your team, and you're saying that you've noticed changes in your team, and you have a diverse team now, and you see that brings different feels into the room. I'm sure this is not the case with JWT, but obviously you work with other clients, and you worked in other places as well. Is representation enough?
It's an interesting question to ask a strategist, because it's our job to represent the consumer voice inside the agency. Essentially have the brain of an Etch-a-Sketch, shake it, forget it, and learn, what a consumer thinks. I think the good strategists will do that no matter who they are, right? It's hard for me to reflect actually whether or not representation is enough. Because strategy tends to actually shift more female than it does male because of the empathetic nature. So it's a hard question for me to ask. I hate to be on a panel and not be able to give you a concrete answer.
We'll give it to Laura. Laura, do you feel?
So do you?
He failed that one. Pass it along. Laura, what do you think? Do you think representation is enough? So, clearly within your own company, you have 2 women at the head of it. Is that enough for creating the kind of content and produce and attitudes within the company that feel gender balanced?
I think it's a start. I think it's a good start, and I am thrilled that, absolutely no disrespect to anyone in the room who is in HR, but when you tend to look at company boards or company officers, a lot of the only females you see are the ones in HR. And to have one who's a CFO And as she likes to say, she's got the cojones that she'll put up against anyone, because she really drives a lot of decisions. So I think, like I said, it's a start. I would like to see some more, but I think that's going to evolve as turnover evolves.
Sarah, I mean, you touched on this earlier when you referenced your friend in Australia saying that women have childcare problems. I mean, this is the line that's trotted out, isn't it? That women don't want to get to the top because they don't want to play a man's game by a man's rules because it doesn't suit their lifestyle. Do you agree with that? Is there a pipeline issue here?
I think all industries need to be more aware of how to accommodate people who are different to the people who are the status quo, and most people are women because they are the childbearers. So I think there needs to be a system in place where you can still succeed even though you are given that role of bringing children into the world. And I think we just haven't, and especially in my country, obviously haven't got to that place yet, if what I've heard is true. But I think we just have to think about more flexible working hours or ways of virtually working, anything to encourage women, not discourage them if they are going to do both things, both be a mother and want to succeed in business. I mean, I chose not to be a mother just because I chose not to be, so I haven't had that burden. But for any women who do want to do that, it would seem so sad that we would lose that vital resource because they decided to choose to bring children into the world.
So you must manage women who become mothers. Do you make allowances? How do you do that?
Absolutely. I have one great CD, and sometimes she just has to leave early, but I know that once she's put the kids to bed and fed them and done all that great stuff, I know she's going to hop back online if we've got some. And I don't like people working long hours, don't get me wrong, but if she has to leave early, she will get back on and try and help with something as soon as she's able. So yes, I mean, in the spirit of trying to encourage women in this industry, you have to be flexible in how you work with them.
Courtney, when you've been producing shows, does that issue come up? Is there a work-life balance, dare I say it, that dreaded phrase that comes into play? Both in the creative and in the way you produce them.
I believe absolutely. For a large part of my career, I guess for the last, I want to say 14 years, I'm the proud mother of a 13-year-old. That would probably be the most challenging part, and if there was ever any gender inequality I've experienced, it's been in that area. But much to my surprise, it has never been an issue for my male bosses. Where I have found it more challenging is within, and this is just my experience, has been with my female superiors. Because there's this unspoken competition that we're competing against men. And that's just never been something I've been willing to participate in, and I've always sought positions that, you know, I let people know when I walk through the door, there's an order of importance to me, and my daughter always comes first. I feel like the career that I've established prior to having her speaks for itself, and so I would just encourage people, although, like I said in the beginning, we have come a long way, but we still have a very long way to go. And just, you know how to value yourself. And I believe, be it your male counterparts or your female now, people will value what you value. Because I've always felt like I go in saying it, not as and not that you implied it like this, not as a burden, but a benefit. It enriches who I am and makes it very, able for me to tell great stories about characters who are mothers, who are balancing. I use all of that. I always have.
There's a Dutch TV series called Borgen. I don't know if you guys have had it over here. And one of the things that's very interesting about Borgen is about a prime minister I think it's in Holland, isn't it? Or it's one of the Scandinavian countries. And she has kids, and it's just a sideline to the story. It's not how is she managing her work-life balance. Oh my God, she's Prime Minister and she's a mother. It's just she's a Prime Minister and these are all her challenges. Oh, and by the way, she's got 2 kids on the side. And I remember when I first watched Borgen, which was a couple of years ago now, thinking that is so great to normalise that.
Yeah.
Torsten.
No, I mean, because it's to categorize it as it's not normal, you have to kind of normalize it. You're working with people who became who they were because of, their parents, so they came through a mother. So we can't act like this is, I'm gonna not be able to do what I've set out to do as a result of my child. However, again, it's just a level of priority, and being someone now that's an executive, she is my priority, but my career, my job is equally my priority, and I get them both done. Not always successfully, but
I really wonder how much work-life balance is going to shift in the next 5 years, because millennials who are requiring work-life or work process to change. So where you work, how you work, how long you work, when you work, they want that to change, right? So you're not always here, right? When they're working, they want to work in different locations. And when they become bosses, what are they going to expect out of their workforce, right? So now you've got children. Are they going to be, and I don't know this to be true, right? Are they going to be more accepting of people not being in a physical location, but rather home with their child, but you're still working, right? It's going to be very interesting to see how millennials are going to shift how we look at work-life balance.
Yeah, totally. If they're not too terrified to do it for themselves. I've had one said to me, I'm definitely not having children, I've seen you and I much prefer to have a career. Now, I want to just quickly turn to the subject of how much is mascots. And I think, one of the great things that the Geena Davis Institute looks at is the quickest way to make change in representation is by talking to young people, because they believe what they see, and mascots is an interesting one. So I would like you each to think of something from your childhood that influenced you and helped inspire, or in fact, actually did you a disservice, just to illustrate how important mascots are. Sarah, can I start with you?
Sure.
Thank you. I love tennis, and there was a woman in the 70s called Yvonne Goolagong Cawley, after she was married, but she was an Indigenous Australian, an Aboriginal Australian, and back in those days, Aboriginal Australians were never seen or heard of, so, and she ended up becoming one of the best tennis players in that era, and won something like 14 Grand Slams, and I think on 2 levels, she was this powerful woman, and she was a powerful Indigenous woman. And I remember just reading stories about how she would inspire young Aboriginal children to come out and play tennis. And, as white colonialists, we did what every conquering country does. They ruin what was there before. And so the Indigenous population of Australia is, just a casualty of that. So I was kind of a politicized young woman, and I was just inspired by this woman's energy and devotion to her people as a woman and as an Indigenous Australian woman.
So how old were you roughly when that was all done?
I'm not telling you that.
Okay, Laura, and who for you?
Who for me?
Yeah.
This is not really a mascot, but I was very, I won't say the word inspired, but impacted by, does anybody remember or watch on one of the shows, The Brady Bunch? Remember The Brady Bunch? Carol Brady stayed at home, helped Alice and ran a bunch of things, and then Mike Brady, the dad, was the architect and got to go to work every day. And for some reason, I always thought, why doesn't she get to go to work? I would be so bored if I had to do what she did. So that really impacted me, and I think growing up, I come from a Hispanic background where it's, very traditional. The men sit, the women cook, and that's just how it is. And my goal, I was told at the time, is to find a man to take care of you. And I'm thinking about Carol Brady, who this is her second husband, and I'm thinking no. So I decided that getting educated was the way I needed to go. And so I'd say that's probably what impacted me the most. So believe it or not, Carol Brady.
Torsten, what about you?
So this one, you actually made me think about this one quite a bit. I took it out of female because, so I had my accident when I was a little younger, and you talked about 0 people being disabled that are mascots. And after my accident, that was something that was very cognizant to me. Now it's something that I never saw until I was in that position, right? And so I'm giving you the non-answer of an answer, but it was something that I actually thought about before I even got into advertising.
That there just wasn't anyone there for you to relate to. Yeah, interesting. What about you, Courtney?
I feel like mine is so colorful. I was most influenced by an HBO special. I was roughly around 7 when that happened at 7. There were 2 things that I loved. Jim Henson had a cartoon that used to just come on. I'm dating myself, but okay. Called Fraggle Rock.
You're not dating yourself. You're in the right room.
I feel better. But believe it or not, there was a Fraggle named Red. I was obsessed with because the characters on Fraggle Rock, the female characters on Fraggle Rock were like the women in power. From the trash lady to, so there was such a strong female presence on Fraggle Rock. I can't believe I'm saying this. But it spoke to me because I was like, oh, we can, the Fraggles are ruling, so female Fraggles. So, I knew then that I could be outspoken and I could have a voice and I could be creative and I could actually be a leader from Fraggle Rock. So thank you, Jim Henson. But then the other thing was, because right after Fraggle Rock came these HBO concert specials, and Diana Ross did a concert in, I think, Madison Square Garden in the park, though. It was raining. And Central Park. Yeah. And she was really promoting her album, where she was the boss. And so, Fraggle Rock inspired me, and then I saw Diana Ross perform, and she was the boss. So I was just equally determined to be the boss.
Yeah.
And that was my plot.
I mean, it was interesting in that era, wasn't it? The pop music was what really led the way. I mean, we're all children of Madonna, right? So, yeah. What about, is there anyone else in the room who's got something to share? Or a question? Okay. Yes, the lady at the back with the glasses.
Hi, thank you so much for your remarks. One of the things I'd like to ask is, if everyone can hear me, I can project. Can you hear me? Yes. I wanted to ask, Courtney, you talk a lot about, breaking barriers, and one of the things I'd like to ask, do you think saying no was something that was difficult early on, or is there a way that we can empower women to say no more often, to assert themselves without being called the B word?
For those who didn't hear it, it was how do women say no?
For me, my grandfather and mother were, my grandfather was a Southern Baptist preacher in both Louisiana and Mississippi. And there was a particular scripture that speaks about making your yes, yes, and your no, no. And I just remember my grandfather preaching a sermon on making your yes, yes, and your no, no, but he emphasized the power of no. So again, I learned at a very early age that no is probably more admirable than yes, because no comes from a place of authenticity that most yeses are rooted in something superficial and fear of what will happen when you don't say no. So I've never had a problem. My daughter would attest to this, that no is probably my favorite word. Because I always felt like, in addition to that, I always knew that we as individuals and as people, we actually our starting point is at no. We don't have what we are inevitably going to ask for. So I've always felt like my base was always no, and then I was always just going to be determined to go after my yes. So no, I don't think no it shouldn't be a problem, because you should, again, know your value and know what it is that you want. So you're always just pursuing your yes anyway. So it kind of takes away the fear of the word no, because that's your start. Hopefully that answered your question.
That was great. Pursue yes and everything else is a no. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
So I do want, because GELSER sponsored this research, and there's a really wonderful story behind it, I do want Laura to tell the story of why we even have this research and why GELSER cared so much. So I do want to make sure she gets that story out.
All right, so for those of you who don't know what or who GELSER is, it's a family-owned and operated company that's been around for about 100 years. And we're in Chicago, so just west of downtown. We make food and beverage products, and people don't know the GELSER name, but they know a few of these brands. Flavor Ice, anyone? Otter Pops? She loves Otter Pops. Wait, where are you? You love Otter Pops.
What's the best flavor?
Bluey Blue Raspberry. Strawberry Shortcake. Those are the top two. Everybody's favorites. And they have a thing going on. But Otter Pops, we also have the Royal brand, and we have Popeyes, and we have Mondo. But the Otter Pops brand in particular is a very strong brand for the company because of these characters. And these characters are multidimensional, which is just a phenomenal thing for the brand. And you talk to people, and they love this brand. And they talk to you about, oh my gosh, I love history just like Alexander the Great. And Sir Isaac Newton is totally into science, and so am I. And he inspired me, and he made it cool that kids didn't pick on me anymore when I was little, all because he liked science too. And so we had these wonderful characters, and they were developed 49 years ago by a man who used to be in advertising. His name was Paul Pope. And the company bought, I'm not sure how many years ago the company bought this brand, but you've got these wonderful characters, and right off the bat, a third of them, a little over 30%, are women and men, all in this cast of little cute little otter characters. And we were so inspired and learned about what the Institute was doing and about gender equality, and we thought, you know, as this brand evolves and where we need to go, there's probably a lot we can learn from this and where we can take this to do the right thing. And so there's going to be more coming with what's going to be new. You can only take a guess about these little characters and how they're going to evolve. But as we learned more by working with the Institute, one of the things that really hit us was, believe it or not, I used to be in advertising, but only in account management. It was logos change and evolve, brands change and evolve. But what about characters? They they need to change and evolve as well. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this. There are a lot of other companies out there that have a lot of characters. Think of the Keebler Elves, Toby the Tiger, and who's really evolved. And we thought, you know what, this is something that's really important to us. And we were so inspired again by some of the learnings when we learned what was going on in entertainment, it just blew us away. It really did. And, you know, when we started talking about this and thinking about it, we just said, you know, who grocery shops in here? Arms, please. Okay, whoever has taken children grocery shopping, arms, please, yes. So we're exposed to a lot of these characters. And just like in entertainment, we know that stereotypes and gender biases can happen just from what people see. And intuitively, we thought, you know, what's going on with all these characters? They really have an impact on us. You know, Toby the Tiger, you're great. You know, the little Keebler Elves or whoever. So that's how it all started. And we're so thrilled, and there's more to come in a couple months.
Can you give us an exclusive sneak peek of the next generation of Jalza characters? Just one. Is she a rocket scientist?
Is she a rocket scientist?
Is she funny? Are they funny?
We already have some who are funny, but what I will say is, while we do not have a chair in the picture, one of them does have something unique that makes them different.
One arm, one leg, one arm.
3 arms.
4 arms.
They're otters.
4 arms.
They're otters.
7 arms.
Oh, well, look, we look forward to that.
So that's coming.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is we also have taken a step back again. When characters are 50 years old, think about what was happening 50 years old. If you were even around then, or what your parents were doing, things have kind of changed a little bit. And so what's wonderful about characters is you can rewrite and expand on their backstories and make them really relevant to today and touch kids and inspire kids and girls and boys both. And I think that's one of the things we have borrowed from the Institute.
I think you need to be commissioning Courtney shortly after this, taking her for a bit now. Really good, that's exciting. Are there any more questions? Yes, the lady who lost the bag.
Hi, thank you so much for this evening. I know it was touched upon a little earlier tonight, but this being International Women's Day, what is the Institute itself, and what are the panelists doing to promote women of color specifically? Not just women, because so often when we hear women, we just automatically assume white, middle class women. And we, not being that, I wanted to know what efforts are being made in your offices and in the stories you're writing.
Who wants to go first?
One of the statistics in entertainment, which is a sad statistic, and it still exists right now, is women only make up 5%. It doesn't matter what you are. You know, women in totality make up 5% of all positions in entertainment, be them directors, actors.
Really?
Yeah, it's extremely 5%. You'll believe it or not, but we make up such a small component of the entertainment industry, particularly women in any real position of power. So again, one of the things that we are doing, and one of the things that we're doing at Adaptive, is we're going after stories, and really because there is a platform right now of that makes our voices and in the various ethnicities open, it makes it a little bit easier for us to bring like projects that showcase authentic stories throughout the various ethnicities. So we're, slowly but surely, again, we're getting in the rooms, we're occupying positions of power and influence that are choosing certain stories. Like I just greenlit a project that I'm really proud about with the first case of sexual harassment. Some of the unsung and unspoken heroes and sheroes in the world today. But it's a slow progress, and it's just like if you have a really good story. I always tell people the best way to showcase story is to write or get stories out there to people because they're interested. More than most are really interested in authentic stories about real walks for women. So, just make it important to you, and it will inevitably become important to us because Hollywood, believe it or not, is listening and they're looking. Oftentimes we don't know about them because we've heard no so many times that it's just up to us to kind of let us know and spotlight stories that haven't been told.
So, it's not specifically helping women of colour, but we've worked on this project. It's been a passion project for all of the women in the agency and some of the blokes as well. And it was to try and address. It's a small thing, but it's a thing that adds up, and that's that things that only women use are actually taxed unfairly in a lot of states. And we worked on this project that is called the Tampon Project, and the idea is that we are trying to overturn the 36 states that still regard all feminine hygiene products as luxuries rather than the necessities that 50% of the bloody population think they are and know they are. And so we worked with Amber Rose to bring to life a lovely sort of tongue-in-cheek film to sort of highlight that this is an outrage, and hopefully we can move the legislation. Arizona is our next state to try and hit to actually change the legislation so tampons and pads are not taxed. But that's something for all women for International Women's Day, and we had our CEO write an op-ed that appeared in Campaign and had a lot of press coverage to support that. So that was our little bit for women on this auspicious day.
The bloody tax.
The pink tax, the bloody tax, not a bloody luxury. Hashtag.
So I'm afraid time's running out, so we're going to have to wrap up. I wanted to ask the panel that we're all in this room, and the fact that we're here means that we're all woke to this issue and aware of it. And I think sometimes you can have these issues in the back of your mind, but not in the front of your mind. And it's actually easier to make change sometimes by doing small things and doing them on a daily basis than trying to change things on a bigger level. So I've asked the panel to tell me the 3 things that they are going to do and that we can take inspiration from to change things tomorrow. And I was particularly inspired, I think, by Frances McDormand's Oscar speech last week, where she asked for an inclusion rider. Cue a million people Googling inclusion rider, what does that mean? So we all now know, because we all Googled it, that you can actually demand when you're put on a project that there is an inclusivity clause in which is part of your contract. And interestingly, Michael B. Jordan today announced that he was going to be doing that for all his projects going forward. And I thought, okay, so that is a big thing that you can do if you're a massive Hollywood star. Torsten, what are the 3 things that you do in your life?
So one, we challenge the people that are in the room. So that's a very simple one, right? Look around at who's around you and make note of that and say something about that. So we do that quite often. I'd say blind resumes is another one from a hiring practice, right? I think most of y'all know what blind resumes are. Yeah, okay. Blind resumes. And mentoring is a big one as well, right? So, yes, the white male is going to look after even the females that are below him and make sure that they are finding their way and being empowered the way they should.
Thank you. Laura? From a work perspective is challenge my team, and I actually challenge everyone here that when you do messaging, if you've got mascots or characters, that you really step back and think about what messages are you getting out there. Are you really inspiring? What are folks going to take away from that? Is there anything that you're doing from a stereotype or a gender basis or from a diversity basis? Are you really saying the right story? So that's one. I think another one is to continue to be open-minded and to not be afraid to say something at the workplace. It's just come out and say why something is the right thing to do. From a personal standpoint, I want to make sure that both of my children understand that they need to stop and think and see what's going on around them, and to make sure that I explain things to them. So things like my son being impressed that Rey from Star Wars Rogue One, wow, she's a girl, and, well, in his mind, a girl, and she was the leader, and she could fight as well as a man. So things like that really then do start to change, so I want to make sure I continue that dialogue.
Number one for me is set people up to win, and really, really pay attention to how I, as an executive, can set people up, and just personally and professionally, set people up to win. The second thing that I would do is I like to listen, and create an atmosphere where people have a voice, and the room's not loud, whatever that room is. And thirdly, I take the meetings, because we've got to start with the simple things, and because I can, I do, and I will.
I got into this industry because I was outraged at how women were portrayed in advertising back then, and I think I just made it my mission to always portray women, with how I want to be seen, not as how they were seen. And I think I've tried to do that creatively and inspire my teams, both men and women, to be respectful of women when they use them in a creative piece of work. So that's one way. Another way, and again, it's a small way, like Courtney was saying, but someone told me that in a room full of, when you're in a room full of people and most of the people are men, and a woman, and I know I've done it myself, you sit there and you kind of want to say something, and then a man says it, and you go, damn, this might be... a simple thing to do is just, if a woman does say something, and maybe it isn't projected or heard, a good thing to do if you're in there as another woman is to repeat that, just so it's made sure that it's heard, and show that kind of sisterhood support. So I found that that's a nice way of just making sure the bastards hear us. And then, not that they're bastards, I love them dearly, I'm married to one. And then the third thing, and it's an industry initiative, and it's called Free the Beard, and I know getting more women, producing more, directing more, writing more, drawing more beautiful mascots and more women planners, is that the more women we have working on more projects, and the more women have more chances to work on more projects, the better all of the industries that we work in will be. And Free the Beard is set up to make sure that when we triple bid a job to shoot a commercial or a project or whatever, that their ask is that at least one is a woman included, because up until now it hasn't been. So it's a bit like the Hollywood Frances McDormand thing, coming right back to where you started, love. I love the way you did that. Of course, 12 years ago, it was Geena Davis, wasn't it? Who started the Geena Davis Institute and begun all of this in some ways. And I'm sure all of you today have had a chance to look down your Instagram feed and see all the incredible women who are being celebrated. And there was one actually who leapt out for me. It was a woman called Audre Lorde, who was a poet. She hailed from Harlem, and I hadn't really come across her before, but I was looking at some of her work today, and there was a particular quote that I was taken with.
She said, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." And I think that speaks to a lot of what we've said this evening. And thank you to my panel for the amazing advice and insights that they've shared. I hope you join me in thanking them, Torsten, Laura, Courtney, and Sarah. And of course, for the Geena Davis Institute as well.
And so I want to thank Tiffanie, who did an extraordinary job moderating tonight. Who's been a critical partner of ours for almost, I think, 4 years, so thanks, JWT. And the bar will still be open for a little bit, so mad rush. And our next salon will be in June, and it will actually be in Brooklyn, and it will be themed around the women of late night comedy. So if you're not a member, become a member, and stay tuned for more. Thank you, everybody.